Grupo Energy Telecom, através de suas 4 empresas, atua em todo o Brasil, integrando os principais serviços e soluções quando pensamos em tecnologia. Projetos de Public Cloud, comunicação unificada, Big Data, infraestrutura, Data Center, Client License, Cybersecurity e educação. Você pode contar com o Grupo Energy Telecom. Sempre a melhor solução.
Nós protegemos a tecnologia para você explorar novas realidades. Fazer o que quiser, quando quiser. Fazer amigos virtuais. Estar perto, mesmo estando longe. E conquistar novas fronteiras. Garantimos sua segurança digital para um futuro melhor. Kaspersky. Bring on the future.
Vale do Paraíba, uma região única com múltiplas vocações. A nossa é a tecnologia, é a inovação. Nós somos a NIP-BR. Trabalhamos para integrar, conectar, expandir, informar, entreter. A NIP-BR é solução corporativa, é internet, TV por assinatura, é telefonia digital. Os melhores serviços com o melhor custo-benefício. NIP-BR, sua melhor opção em internet, telefonia e TV por assinatura.
Você é daqueles que acham que ser moderno é ter um aplicativo para cuidar do seu dinheiro? É também. Agora, moderno mesmo é fazer parte de um grupo de pessoas que cooperam e crescem juntas.
Tem gente que acha que um bom atendimento é ter um gerente pronto para te ajudar. Nada mal, né?
Mas pra gente ter voz
e participar das decisões relacionadas ao nosso dinheiro.
Tem gente que acha que somos um banco. Somos muito mais. Somos feitos de valores.
Our infrastructure and natural resources can't keep up with growing demands. We need to be smarter. We need to care more. It's time to create smart infrastructure. We can because we connect energy systems and industries to adapt and evolve the way we live and work for the good of the planet and the people. Creating environments that care. Smart infrastructure from Siemens.
A maior rede de pesquisas do mundo, com 5,5 bilhões de acessos por dia. Uma rede social avaliada em 70,7 milhões. Sabe qual a semelhança entre essas empresas? O investimento em softwares e algoritmos inteligentes. Tinova e SPS.
Na era da transformação digital, a Tria Software é o seu parceiro ideal. Trabalhamos com a aplicação de solução em software padronizada ou sob medida para melhorar o desempenho dos processos de sua empresa. Tria Software.
Olá, muito boa tarde. Voltamos ao vivo com a transmissão da 7ª RM Vale TI.
We are now back live with the transmission of the 7th RBM79, and with the fourth Brazilian Space Industry Forum. The first time we're doing this online. I work here at the Technological Park of São José dos Campos, but our speakers are still in doing this virtually so that we're following all social distancing rules. And now we have Industry 4.0 as the topic. But before that, we now have the last panel of the day inside the program for the Space Forum. This will be in Portuguese, but if you need translation for English, the translation icon is on the upper right corner of the globe icon on the upper right corner of our platform. That's where you can find the translation. So for our last panel, this is very interesting panel. They're going to show you how space technology can be applied not only in Industry 4.0, communication, agriculture, in a variety of different businesses and domains. So let's introduce our speakers. Professor Herbert, Flávio Augusto, Maria Teresa, and Professor Andrea. Professor Andrea will be our mediator, our moderator. She is a professor here at the University of Brasilia, a doctor in economy. So thank you very much. Have a great day of work. Thank you, Mirella. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrea Cabello. I'm a professor of the economy department in the University of Brasilia, and I'll be moderating this table. The space sector is not only about the satellite manufacture system. Space economy in 2019 moved more than $360 billion, and a lot of this value was created through the application of space technologies. These space applications, they use space technology. For instance, in precision agriculture, Industry 4.0, a variety of different segments end up using space technology in this sense. In this panel, we're going to talk about a few applications that enable us to transform our lives. So we have three different specialists to talk to us today. The first is Professor Herbert Kimura from the University of Brasilia, from the business department. From the business department in University of Brasilia, and he's also doing his PhD. He already has two PhDs, but he's also doing a statistics PhD. He is the coordinator of the technological program in the University of Brasilia, which helps public institutions and private institutions in risk management. And he has developed projects in applying artificial intelligence in various different segments. Later, we're also going to talk to Maria Teresa Azevedo Lima from Embratel and Flávio Augusto from Banco do Brasil. So while we can't deal with this issue, let's talk to Maria Teresa Lima, an executive director in the Embratel. She specialized in telecommunications in the University of Brasilia and FGV, as well as PUC. Over the last decade, she has led the Embratel's sales of IT and telecommunications. So she's going to talk about space solutions in this area of IT and telecommunications. Hello, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for your invitation. I am very pleased to be a part of this roundtable with two professors from the University of Brasilia. That's my alma mater, as well as a representative from Banco do Brasil, who is a great partner and a great client for Embratel. We're at this very moment discussing new technologies and innovations using 5G platforms with Banco do Brasil. And I also have an account at Banco do Brasil, which is a bank. So it's a great pleasure. So I would like to start. I am from Embratel. Embratel is the B2B unit for Claro Brazil, and Claro is a part of América Móvel, which is a leader in telecommunications in Latin America. Embratel acts in the market for 55 years in the Brazilian market for small, medium, and large enterprises. In September, it completed 55 years of age. Like a colleague of mine says, She is an old lady, but she has the body of a startup. So we have a very complete portfolio and have a role and the commitment of helping our clients to promote their digital transformation. So I divided this into 3 themes, which I think are very important. I'm going to talk about 5G in the future. I'm going to talk about the challenges for 5G, which I think are very relevant, and then what us from Claro and Bertel are doing in relation to this future. So I'd just like to start by talking about the history of mobile internet. It's something that's really recent if you think about it. It started in 1982 with 1G, and now in 2020 we're reaching 5G. We started with very low transmission rates just for voice. 2G allowed for text. 3G gave us access to the internet. 4G gave us access to video content. And now we're entering the realm of 5G, in which we're going to get to a speed of 1 gigabyte per second. And now we don't yet know what are going to be the most important applications, but it's going to be the great platform which really fosters the Internet of Things all over the world. It's interesting to note that today we have in our company 2G, 3G, 4G living together, so to speak. We have these 3 different platforms, and now we're starting to operate 5G, still using the DSS mode. This is not a definitive platform for us. So if you compare 5G to 4G, what are we talking about? It is really a leap in terms of transmission speed. It is a leap in the lag. It's really going to significantly reduce latency, and it is a platform which depends especially in the spectrum width, because that's something really scarce and really valuable. We work in 3.6 giga. And as I commented, we still don't know what the real applications that this will enable. So how are we in the world today? 5G started very recently, but it's already covering 7% of the population. It is present in 24 countries. And 39 countries are in the process of implementation. So soon, 1 in every 5 connections all over the world will be connected through 5G. So all of the industry in the world will need to make large investments in the next few years. Okay?
Sobre o futuro, né, eu queria destacar algo que eu li recentemente no relatório da
In relation to the future, I'd really like to highlight something that I saw in the GAFA
e ela fala coisas muito
reports.
interessantes do tipo.
It says something really interesting.
No futuro muito próximo, todas as pessoas vão estar usando algum wearable.
So soon, everyone will be using digital wearable, maybe to monitor their health, and that companies will be implementing their own networks in a very short term, that 5G will be in most countries, and that in 2030, our cars will probably be autonomous, using maybe not completely autonomous, but at least in level 4, which is highly autonomous. Something that I think is very interesting that we talk about in the telecom operators, that for the first time in the history of mobility, this technological change will actually impact companies more than people. This is really a disruptive process. Why? Because this will allow for a huge increase in productivity in every level of industry. This is a real example of an industry in China that did an automation process
usando já
a
a
few years
plataforma
ago,
5G,
using the
trocou
5G
as
platform
equipes
already.
por robôs e obteve,
They
num prazo
switched
muito
a lot
curto,
of
um
their
aumento de
teams by
produtividade de
robots, and
250%.
in a
Esse
very short
um
term, they
exemplo que
increased
vai
their
acontecer. Outras
productivity by
coisas que vão
250%.
acontecer,
Other
né,
things
como
which will
resultado dessa
happen
inovação
as a
tecnológica,
result of
é
this
que
technological innovation
a plataforma 5G, a tecnologia
is that
5G,
the
vai
5G
significar um
platform and
grande
technology
aumento
will mean a great increase
na economia, vai ter um impacto muito grande na
in
economia
the
da ordem de
economy.
2
It will have a
bilhões de
really huge
milhões, não
impact
vai
in
ser
the economy. It
de
will
todas as regiões do mundo, né?
contribute 2.2
Mas aqui na
trillion
América
to the global
Latina vai ter um
economy. But
impacto
here
muito
in
grande.
Latin
E
America,
embaixo diz mais ou
it will
menos
also have
quais
a
serão os
relevant
setores
impact.
que mais se
And
beneficiarão.
after
Então,
that,
são, de
below that,
fato, a
you can see
indústria, a
what are
indústria
the
4.0,
sectors which will be the
setor de
most,
utilities, energia, água, gás,
which will have the most benefits:
serviços
manufacturing,
profissionais e
utilities,
financeiros,
professional and
serviços
financial
públicos,
services,
setor
public
TIC,
services,
comércio e varejo, e
ICT
agricultura
and
e mineração,
trade,
né?
as well
E
as agriculture and
aqui no
mining.
país, no Brasil, com certeza a
So
agricultura vai
here
ter
in Brazil,
uma
I'm sure that
participação mais
agriculture will
relevante,
have a
tá?
very
Do
large
que no Brasil, no
participation
restante da América Latina.
than in
Em
the rest
termos
of
de
Latin America,
aplicação, né, de
perhaps. In
aplicações
terms of
possíveis, todas
applications,
as
possible
áreas vão
applications,
ser
every
impactadas.
area will be impacted.
E o que muito se
And
espera é uma ênfase
what we expect
em
really is an
robôs,
emphasis
em carros
in
autônomos,
autonomous
transportes autônomos, não
cars,
só carros, mas
autonomous
hoje
transportation, not
já
just cars,
existem
but today we already have
tratores e máquinas agrícolas que são totalmente autônomas,
agricultural machines
caminhões que
which are
são totalmente
completely
autônomos operando
autonomous,
mineradores,
autonomous trucks
né?
in
A
mines,
combinação de drones com
the combination
robôs
between
para
drones with
impulsionar a
robots
agricultura
in
4.0,
order to really drive
a
agriculture
automação de portos e
4.0, the
aeroportos,
automation of ports
cidades,
and
prédios
airports,
e casas inteligentes,
cities and
buscando
smart cities, smart
eficiência
buildings,
de
smart homes,
recursos e também
seeking resource
segurança, seja pública,
efficiency as
seja
well
privada,
as security and safety,
e
both
um
public and
avanço
private,
muito grande nos transportes. Tudo
and
isso
also a
vai
really
ser
huge advance in transportation.
permitido,
So
né, vai
all
ser
of this will
alcançado
be
com a
enabled
implantação do 5G,
with
o
the
que com
implementation of
certeza
5G.
também irá
And certainly,
conviver com 4G,
this
com
will
as plataformas de
also
Narrowband IoT
uh,
e
co-
TAT-M, que
live
hoje já
together,
estão
will
comercialmente.
exist
Então,
together with
assim, é
4G
muito amplo falar de
for a
aplicações,
long time. So
mas
it's
o
very wide for me
certo
to talk about new
nenhum
applications, but what
setor
we are
da
sure of is
economia
that there
vai
is one
ficar
sector of the
imune a
no
essa
sectors in the
transformação
economy will be
tecnológica
immune to this
no
technological
curto prazo, né?
transformation in the short
Todos
term.
serão igualmente
All
impactados,
of
tá?
them will be impacted, okay? Every
Falando
sector in
sobre
the
os
economy.
desafios para essa
So when we're
transformação, para essa
talking about
evolução,
challenges
né?
for this
Como eu
transformation
comentei,
and
é um
evolution,
setor
as I
que, quer
commented
dizer, é
before, this is a sector
uma área que vai
or
depender
this is an area which
demais
will
de
really
disponibilidade de
depend
frequências,
on the
então ainda não houve
availability of
essa
frequencies. So
licitação,
we
não houve
still do
leilão das
not
frequências
have
para
this
5G, isso deve acontecer no ano que
framework for
vem.
5G. We should have that maybe
Temos
next
uma
year in
questão
Brazil.
de
We
interferência ainda
have an
do
issue of
5G
interference
para os
of
serviços de
5G
mobilidade e de
together
TV
with
aqui no país, então isso precisa ser
here
resolvido.
in the country
Como eu
with
comentei, nós
mobility
vamos precisar ter muito
services.
mais
As I
antenas
commented
e
before,
muito
we'll
mais
need to have a
infraestrutura
lot
do que
more
temos hoje.
antennas, a lot
Significa
more
que
infrastructure than we
obter
have today
as licenças e as autorizações
so
para fazer
that
essa expansão
we
vai
can
ser
have
muito
these
importante.
licenses, the
Não
authorizations
vai
to do this.
acontecer internet das coisas do país se de
Internet of
fato nós
Things
não
in the
enfrentarmos a
country
questão da
will
carga
not take
tributária,
hold if
né?
we do not
Isso pode
change the
causar um
issue
atraso muito
of
grande
the
na implantação de
tax
novas
load, the
aplicações
burden
com
of
internet das
taxes in
coisas.
Brazil.
E talvez o
Internet of Things
desafio
will
que
not
eu
happen
acho que
with
é o
that.
mais
And I think that the
relevante é
challenge,
o
which I
de
think is the most relevant,
desenvolver
is the
ecossistema
development of
que
an
possa, de
ecosystem
fato,
which might,
criar
in fact,
novas aplicações
create
para
new
a
applications
internet
for
para o 5G, para a
the
internet das
Internet of
coisas,
Things and
envolvendo
5G,
operadoras, fabricantes,
involving
devices,
operators,
integradores,
devices, manufacturers,
desenvolvedores. Então, assim, é todo
integrators,
um
developers.
ecossistema que precisa ainda ser desenvolvido.
All of this still needs to be
Falando
developed.
rapidamente sobre o que nós estamos fazendo, né? Bom, eu acho que eu esqueci de comentar, mas vale comentar. Nós temos hoje uma frota própria de satélites, né, de comunicação, nós temos 6 satélites de comunicação,
So I forgot to
um
mention
sétimo
earlier
sendo
that we have
lançado
our own
no
fleet
ano
of
que vem,
satellites,
deveria estar sendo
okay?
lançado esse ano, mas
And it's going to
sofreu
be
pouco
launched
o
this
efeito da
year,
pandemia.
but
Como é que
because
nós
of the
estamos nos
pandemic,
organizando
it's a
para esse
little
novo mundo,
delayed,
né?
and
Usando
we are
toda a
organizing
plataforma que
ourselves for
nós
this new
temos à
world.
disposição.
So
A
we
Claro tem
have all of these
investido
platforms available.
fortemente
Claro
nos
has
últimos
been
anos, nos
investing
últimos
a
3 anos,
lot in the
mais
last
de
3 years,
28 milhões de
about
reais.
8 million reais, approximately 8 million reais.
E além
It has been
disso,
investing, and
está
besides this,
fazendo esses investimentos em expansão de
it is
rede, backbone,
investing in backbone,
data centers, em nuvem,
data
todos
centers,
os serviços
cloud
necessários para
computing, all of the necessary
essa nova
services
realidade.
for this
A
new
nossa engenharia,
reality that we
claro,
have.
está não só
And
testando
our
e
engineering
experimentando novas
department, of
soluções, mas
course, is
também
not only testing
capacitando
the
toda a
new
nossa equipe
applications, but
técnica. A
they are
Embratel
training the
coube
entire technical
a
team.
implantação de nuvem privada e
Embratel is
o
responsible for
credenciamento e
the cloud
atuação junto com
computing
nuvens
issues
públicas,
and
e também
also
desenvolvimento
for
junto aos nossos
connecting with
clientes
the
de
public
modelos,
sector and the
buscar
development
novos modelos
jointly
de
with our
negócio.
clients
E a
for
Beyond é o nosso polo
all
de inovação que
applications.
busca
And
prospectar
there is an
mercados, startups
environment,
e
an
atuar junto com a
innovation
academia
environment that
e
is
crescer
trying
em
to
segmentos
find
muito verdes para
startups,
trazer novas
support
aplicações.
from the
Por fim,
academia, from the government.
lançamos no meio
And
da pandemia, 8
finally,
de julho, o nosso 5G,
on the
ainda
8th of
DSS,
July, we launched our
demonstramos
GSL
games,
5G,
mostramos carros autônomos, mais uma
and
vez
we
autônomos em São
showed
Paulo,
autonomous
e também
vehicles. We
entretenimento
showed
com
everything in São
shows
Paulo,
baseados em holograma. Quem tiver
entertainment with
interesse, o evento
shows,
está nesse link abaixo.
with
Isso para dar um panorama
holographs.
de como é que nós estamos vendo o
And so,
futuro aí da
just to
nossa
give
área.
you a general overview about the future of our industry. Thank you so much.
Bom, eu vou agradecer então a
So, thank you so much,
da Maria Tereza.
Maria Teresa, for your wonderful presentation.
Que resolveu
And now Professor Herbert Kimura was able to solve his technical problem, and so I would like to pass the floor to him. Thank you very much, Professor Andrea. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Yes, okay. Thank you. So I'm going to talk about artificial intelligence, but my natural intelligence here for my technology and my computers was not enough. So thank you so much for the invitation by the Brazilian Space Agency to be part of this panel, to be sharing it with Maria Teresa and Mr. Flávio Augusto. So I'm going to move on to my presentation. Okay, so here's my slide. Yes, I can use the clicker here. So the main idea behind my presentation is to discuss the applications of artificial intelligence in the space industry. And the idea here is to show machine learning, everything regarding machine learning that is being used in the space industry, and what we're going to be able to have and what we're going to be able to use here on Earth as well. So some applications have already started on Earth, and they are being expanded to the space, and some other applications are rising or arising in space, and they are being applied to the Earth model. So when we talk about artificial intelligence in the space industry, the first thing that people think about are robots, R2D2, CPO, and so the older ones. Remember those Lost in Space? Remember that TV show? And so the name came from IBM. Hall are the letters that come before the B, I, B, and M from IBM. So every time we think about artificial intelligence, people think about robots, intelligent robots, and they have a body similar to a human body. Okay, and things like this. But the applications of artificial intelligence nowadays in the space industry, they are much simpler than this highly sophisticated artificial intelligence. So one of the first applications of AI in the space industry comes in the manufacturing production industry, so that you can produce and develop satellites and spacecrafts. You must have clean rooms to avoid contamination. The equipment must be of high precision. Sometimes human beings, they cannot concentrate and focus so intensely to produce satellites and spacecrafts. And so robots, they have been used to manufacture this kind of equipment. And the big issue here is that AI is being used so that precision and accuracy can be higher, and also to take certain random aspects into consideration as well during the production process. So AI is also responsible for random issues, and the robot starts being automatically adjusted and adapted to change this or to fix this. And it's very important to mention that AI is also being used in cobots, which are collaborative robots, and each robot depends on and impacts the production chain, the production process, the development process of other robots. And it's also important to mention that when it comes to the manufacturing and production, we have the retrofeeding process, data retrofeeding process. And so a robot with AI can quickly adjust its movements and the conditions, okay, that need to be adjusted. So this is the first application of AI in the space industry. Another application, and this is a more immediate application, and it's being widely used in the market. It is for analyzing data. And so satellites have been generating thousands and millions of thousands of data from images. And from these data, we can use AI to identify climatic aspects, environmental disasters, where exactly, at which points on the planet are we having environmental disasters. And there is also a NASA project, and from other organizations, they are trying to identify mosquito larvae of places, and also where fires are happening. And so NASA personnel, they indicate the satellites, and the satellites take pictures from some parts of the planet, but these photos or pictures, they are not so accurate over some regions. So there is a project called the Globe Observer, and they call them the citizenship scientists, because you, jointly with an image from a satellite, you can collect data, and these data are collected by the common citizen. So you have students, high school students, for instance, that are going to investigate the areas where they live, the areas near their homes, and they're going to try to find mosquito eggs or mosquito larvae at those places. They're going to analyze the latitude, the longitude, and with the satellite images, they're going to be able to identify these focal places where there are many mosquitoes reproducing. And they can use machine learning to forecast the places that need attention, so that we can avoid the mosquitoes that transmit diseases. And you also have telescope images and images from observatories that can analyze the universe as a whole. So AI is being used to identify planets, to analyze the atmosphere of certain planets, to analyze the possibility of having
Uma aplicação interessante que foi realizada recentemente foi que a inteligência artificial criou sensor virtual. Então havia um observatório em que um sensor de ultravioleta extrema foi danificado né? E assim, com dados históricos e com dados de outros sensores, foi possível rodar um algoritmo de inteligência artificial que conseguisse reproduzir dados que deveriam ser coletados por esse sensor danificado. Então, criou-se um sensor virtual a partir aí
So
de
it's a
dados
virtual
que foram
sensor.
observados aí pelo equipamento. Então, essa é uma outra aplicação
Okay.
também de
And so
inteligência
this is
artificial
another
para
application
análise gerada pelos
of
telescópios
AI.
e
And so you
observatórios.
can analyze the images
Importante
from telescopes and
também destacar
observatories.
outras
And it's also
aplicações que,
important
por
to mention
exemplo,
other
envolvem
applications,
uma
as for
representação
instance,
3D de asteroides.
3D
Tipicamente, com
representation of
modelos tradicionais,
asteroids.
você leva
And
de 1 a
so
3
with
meses
the
para
traditional
conseguir
models that we have, it
modelar
takes up to
qual o
1 to
tamanho do
3 months
asteroide, qual o
so
formato
that you
dele.
can model
Utilizando
how big
inteligência
the
artificial,
asteroid is,
consegue-se
what is its
praticamente em real
shape.
time
But with
identificar
AI,
a configuração e
it's
formato
almost
desse
in real time that you
asteroide.
can
Também
get a
há
3D
questões
representation
de
of
modelagem
asteroids.
preditiva da trajetória de
And you can
objetos
also
próximos à
have
Terra, né?
predictive modeling
Então, se
of
utiliza a
objects that
inteligência artificial
are
também para
orbiting
identificar
near
qual seria
Earth,
a
to
trajetória
identify near Earth
desses objetos
objects,
aí,
and also
para
to
eventualmente
identify their
prevenir ou
trajectory,
ter algum
to
early warning
avoid
system aí sobre
to
um
have a
possível
warning
impacto na
system
Terra.
about possible impacts
Bom,
on
outras
Earth.
aplicações envolvem
Other
operação de equipamentos.
applications
Então, você pode
have to
utilizar a
do with the
inteligência artificial para
operation of
operar
equipment.
satélites
So you can
estacionários à
use
distância,
AI
né?
to
Então, você
operate
pode otimizar a
satellites and
comunicação, por exemplo, entre o
spacecrafts
satélite e a
remotely.
base terrestre.
They can
Então,
have communication
você
between
pode não
their base
necessariamente,
here on
você
Earth
economiza, por
and the
exemplo, o envio
spacecraft,
de
and you
dados
can
do satélite para a
save
Terra,
on
porque
sending data
eventualmente
to
o
the
mecanismo de
satellite
inteligência
or from the
artificial conseguir
satellite to
preencher
Earth,
alguns dados
and
faltantes, por exemplo.
AI can
Isso pode
fill in the
reduzir o consumo de
gaps that you
bateria
have
e
there.
aumentar a
You
vida
can
útil
reduce the
aí do
use of the
satélite.
batteries, you can
Outra
optimize the
aplicação é
communication,
você
you can
utilizar a
increase the
inteligência artificial
lifespan
para
of the
fazer com que
satellites,
satélites
and
ou
AI can
estacionários
also be
e até
used
mesmo os
so that
astronautas, né,
satellites and
consigam se
spacecrafts,
desviar de detritos aí
they can
espaciais.
deviate from debris,
Bom,
from space debris.
com relação à operação de equipamentos também, a
And
inteligência
regarding
artificial
the
está sendo
operation of
utilizada
equipment,
para
AI
você
is also
navegar,
being used
né, um
for you
robô
to navigate
no planeta Marte, por exemplo.
on Mars,
Então,
for
de certa forma, é muito
instance.
semelhante às aplicações
So it's
aí de
very
carros
similar to
autônomos
the
no planeta
applications
Terra,
that
né?
we are using
Então,
here
basicamente, você
on
tem um robô que, utilizando a inteligência artificial, ele consegue identificar quais são as melhores rotas, né? E os melhores, eu diria assim, o melhor caminho aí para
decide
seguir
what
para
are the best
conseguir
routes,
explorar
what are the
uma
best
quantidade maior
paths,
aí
so
de
that they can
solo, né? Ou de
explore a
espaço no planeta Marte com um
greater
consumo
space,
mínimo aí de
greater
energia.
soil, greater part of the soil.
Finalmente, algumas
And
outras
finally,
aplicações, né?
other
Gestão de lixo espacial.
applications, okay,
Então,
how to
já
manage space
existem
debris.
protótipos, eu diria assim,
And
de
so we already have
equipamentos, né,
some
que utilizam inteligência
prototypes of
artificial para
equipment
detectar e
that use
capturar lixo
AI so
espacial.
that they can
Então, a partir
detect
eles
and
usam uma espuma para
capture a
capturar
space debris
esse lixo espacial e
so that they
eventualmente
can
colocar naquele
catch
esparadrapo
this space
terrestre para ser
debris
queimado, né?
and
Então,
it
essa é
can
uma
be
outra
burned
aplicação de inteligência artificial
when
na
they
indústria
reinsert it into
espacial.
Earth's atmosphere, okay?
E, finalmente, eu diria assim,
And
aplicações
finally,
bastante interessantes que talvez
very
ainda estejam
interesting
em estágio
applications
inicial,
of AI,
mas
and
que
maybe they are
serão, eu
still
diria
very
assim,
incipient,
bastante impactantes,
beginning,
talvez, no
but they
futuro, com
would cause a huge
viagens espaciais, eu
impact
diria assim, mais
on the
longas.
future, on
Uma primeira
space
aplicação é você
travel.
utilizar
The
inteligência
first one
artificial para
is
regras
to
de
use
exploração,
AI to
né?
define
Então, por
exploration
exemplo, no
rules
caso do
and
planeta Terra,
regulations.
houve aquele
So, for
tratado de
example, when we
Tordesilhas, por
consider
exemplo, para
Earth,
separar o
there
mundo
was
aí
a treaty to
em
separate
regiões.
the
Talvez
world
no espaço
into
também haja
regions,
alguma,
the
no
Tordesilhas
futuro
Treaty.
haja
And
alguma
maybe in space,
questão que
we're
tenha que ser feito
gonna
sobre
have an
fronteiras,
issue
né?
and we're
E
gonna
daí, como
have to
ninguém
decide
sabe
the
direito qual é o
borders, the
mapa do
space
universo,
borders.
talvez a
And
inteligência
so, to
artificial
decide the
possa
map of the
tentar ajudar a
universe,
criar
maybe
um
AI
mapa aí
can help
para as
us
pessoas
create this
fazerem
map.
fronteiras espaciais.
And people
Então, outras
creating
aplicações de
space
inteligência artificial
borders.
envolvem
So
navegação
other
em viagens
applications of
espaciais,
AI,
análise de perfil de
navigation in
astronautas, né?
space
Então, você quer
travel,
ter um astronauta que
analyzing the
precisa viajar,
profile
sei
of
lá, ou ficar
astronauts.
2
So
anos
let's
no
imagine that
espaço,
you're
é
going to have an
importante, então,
astronaut
você
who's
ter um
going to
perfil
stay away
adequado
from home
para esse
for 2
tipo de
years. So we must choose an astronaut with the appropriate profile for this kind of mission. And so AI can help you do that. What are the best profiles for short, medium, and long-term missions? We can use AI for medical treatments. And so maybe you have an astronaut there in space and he's not feeling well. And if you have data available, AI can maybe recommend the best treatment. And also for longer trips, people are going to become a little more anxious, and AI could be used to interact, socially interact with the astronauts. Okay? And finally, some opportunities and risks. And so AI usually have a black box. The models using AI usually have a black box. And this could be dangerous if you do not know how to program it or use it appropriately. So maybe during your mission, the objective is to achieve my mission, but maybe it's not saving lives, but you cannot place astronauts in danger. And another risk is that the applications of AI in the space industry, they are doubly risky because AI is still starting, it's still at its beginning. And so the space industry involves a lot of risk. And so double risk associated with these applications of AI, okay? And finally, some legal aspects and also behavioral aspects. So the manager or the astronaut, for instance, how is this astronaut going to behave depending on a certain order, depending on the order from the computer, the AI? And so this is not the main focus of my presentation, but they have to be taken into consideration, okay? So that we can develop AI in the space industry. So thank you very much for your attention. And so thank you once again for the opportunity and invitation to be here with you guys. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Professor Herbert Kimura. And now to continue our presentations, I'd like to open the floor to Flavio Basilio. He is an economist with a master's and PhD in economy. He has worked in various ministries. He has experience in the government. He's also taught in various universities, and he is now a risk analyst and a career professional in Banco do Brasil. And he is a specialist in risk analysis, cyber risk analysis, as well as supervision tests for entities connected to the bank. And he's here to tell us a little bit about the importance of these space-based technologies in our payment systems. So Flavio, tell us how that works a little bit. Thank you so much, Professor Andrea. I'd also like to thank the Brazilian Space Agency for the invitation and also for the opportunity of sharing this space with Professor Maria Teresa, Professor Herbert. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the application of space technologies in the banking system. For a long time, I was the Secretary of Defense Products in the Defense Department, Defense Ministry in Brazil. And the way that we work in industry in Brazil has to do with the applications. So it's there's military applications, but also civilian applications. So when we're talking about space, it's particularly important for us to enter the discussion because the Brazilian space industry, even though it's an industry that has a lot of knowledge, that has an important basis in the ITA Institute, and there's an ecosystem, we really depend on contacts to survive. We depend on contracts to really be able to sustain itself. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the possible interactions between space industry and those the knowledge that is applied from these space technologies, but also the opportunities for the Brazilian banking system. So it's really a great satisfaction to talk after Professor Herbert because he already talked about a series of applications of AI. And today, the banking sector might be the one that needs the most artificial intelligence applications. So anything that is good in space will be good for credits. Anything that will be good for a satellite image that will be applied in environmental studies, in controlling mosquitoes. This can also be used to define credits. What are the areas where I'm going to apply the credit? Where I'm going to select where to apply my credit? So if we integrate all of this knowledge, then we can see that this issue of Internet of Things will really revolutionize the banking industry and the world as a whole. So, what do we have as far as news, novelties that we can present? So, what do you have as far as context in the changes in the banking system? If you think about the banking sector, in the last 10 to 15 years, we've had transformations that are bigger than the ones in the 200 previous years. If you think about way back in the beginning of the banking sector, it's an institution that takes your money and then afterward they start doing credit operations because it saw that their clients didn't actually get all of their resources immediately. So this allowed banks to leverage their resources. And so this is the same way that we do things, but now over the last 15 to 20 years, the transformations are so huge that we also see a revolution in the banking system with new opportunities. So there is a change in the expectation from consumers. The consumers are changing. Consumers don't want to go to the agency anymore, don't want to go to a physical bank anymore. They want a different kind of relationship with the bank. So these are huge changes in the clients. There's in the banking structure, there's a change as well. So we've been seeing a lot of change in the banking regulation, important changes. We've also recently seen in the Central Bank of Brazil an opening up of this market. So there's different. So before this, for payments, it was a monopoly of very few banks. Now there's a lot of different companies that have credit card machines. Competition has really been very large strides. We have fintechs coming into the market. They're going to take a little bit of the market of the traditional banking system. Innovation really is going on in the banking sector. Is not the banking sector is not just banks. We're also basically doing data processing. We're talking about the intensive use of new technologies. We're not really looking for commercial managers anymore. We're looking for data analysts, data engineers. I think that's very important. And so based on these transformations, we'll have the reduction of banking spread, reduction of financial uh, intermediation. We're going to have a very deep digital inclusion. During the pandemic, we've been seeing that all of the payments of the benefits have been done through the banking system. So a lot of different people are being digitally included. We're looking into ways that we can still keep on fostering this. And of course, we have these different operations, fintechs, and all of these other new players in the market. So the banking system today basically has five pillars. These were the five pillars that made the banking that are the same for the old banking system and the new banking system. We have the capillarity of the support network. So basically, before, if you had the most bank agencies, you were the most competitive. Now we can ask if this still is just a competitive advantage or if it's just cost. We have a closed structure for offering services. What does that mean? Back in the day, you went to a bank and you bought your insurance. You had a capitalization system. You did everything in the same bank. That's not the same anymore. So this is going to be more and more rare. You're going to buy an insurance from one bank, and then you're going to have an account in their competition. So they're going to be bank as services or bank as platforms now with the use of artificial intelligence. If you're going to buy, let's say, a truck, you already know what is the truck that you want to buy, and then you ask then you're buying from the manufacturers, and then we're already offering you insurance and other different services, credit. The monopoly of the payment means this really has ended already. Now before payments were only done through the banking system. Now we have a variety of different stakeholders and
ambiente que vai
actors
vir
which
com esse
are
flow de
in the
dados.
system. As far as
Isso é
client data monopoly,
alguns falam
this
que
is really an
a
asset.
petróleo,
Some
né, o
people
ouro,
say
essa questão de
that this is
dados,
the new gold,
bancos
the
têm
new
muito
oil
dados, bancos
data,
sabem.
and
Então,
banks
os
have a
clientes
lot of
consomem,
data.
eles consomem
Banks
commodity,
know
eles têm que
what
consumir
clients
esses clientes.
consume, what is
Então,
their
tem uma montanha de dados, só
consumption
que o próprio
profile.
sistema bancário está em
But if you
transformação e a gente
look,
vai ver que o
the
open
banking
banking
system as
vai
a whole is
quebrar esse
changing,
monopólio
and
de dados.
open
Então,
banking is
vai
really
ter
going to
oportunidade de toda essa
break
natureza,
this
oportunidade de
data
investimento de
monopoly.
quem tiver vantagem competitiva,
There's going to be a
vai
lot of
sair
opportunities
ganhando
for
e,
investment,
obviamente,
and those who have
é
a competitive edge will
muito
really win
importante para a
out.
aplicação
And this is
global
a
da
very, very,
tecnologia
very
artificial, da
important
inteligência artificial no campo do sistema
part
bancário.
of
A
how
gente
we're
sabe
going
que a
to apply
indústria
artificial
de
intelligence
defesa e, particularmente, da
technology in
inteligência
this industry.
espacial,
The
tem muito.
space
Agora, o
industry
último
and
ponto
the
ainda é
and
um
the
ponto que
defense
eu
industry
poderia
have a
dizer que é
lot
o
of this.
último
And
pilar intacto do
the
sistema
last
bancário, que é a
pillar,
capacidade de gerar
really,
moeda
in
e
the
conceder empréstimo.
institutional
Ou
bank,
seja,
which is the
criar moeda
capacity of
ainda é
creating
um
currency
privilégio do sistema
and
bancário, isso é
also
difícil de
of
quebrar,
giving credit.
porque a gente tem que ter o
And so
reconhecimento de
creating
valores
currency
ativos
is
para
still
fazer
a
essa
part of the
operação.
banking system.
Então, é o
This
último
is not going to
pilar
be
que os
broken so
bancos
soon.
têm ainda de
This is the
vantagem
last pillar
comparativa
that
quando a
banks
gente
still have
compara
as
esse
a
ecossistema
comparative
com os outros fatores. Então,
competitive
isso é um ponto para
edge
a gente
in
observar
relation to
e
other
oportunidade.
stakeholders
Aqui, falando um pouco
in the
do Open
context.
Banking, o
So
que é
we're
esse
going to talk
Open
about open
Banking?
banking a little
Open
bit.
Banking
What
é
is open
aquela quebra
banking?
do monopólio de dados. Então,
Is when you
observe que
break the
quando os
data
grandes bancos
monopoly. So
perdem os seus dados e outras instituições
all
podem ter acesso a esses dados,
so
elas
maybe
podem ter
if you
acesso a
open
uma
your data
informação muito valiosa.
to other
Então, nós vamos
institutions, they might
ver
have
que com essa
access
quebra de
to
dados,
very
nós vamos
valuable
ver a
information.
entrada de
So
novos
if
atores
we
no mercado. Então,
do
aqui
this, we're going
destacado
to
aqui no
know that
Open
there are
Banking,
new
a
actors
gente
coming
pode
into the
colocar não
system.
apenas
I'd like
outras
to highlight
instituições
not
financeiras,
only other
como
financial
seguradoras, por
institutions
exemplo,
like
mas
insurance
aqui a gente
companies,
também vai ver
but
muito fortemente a
we'll
operação de
also
novos
really see
participantes, como
new
Apple,
kinds of
como
participants
Amazon,
like
como Google,
Apple,
entrando
Amazon,
rapidamente nesse
Google.
mercado. Então,
They're
a
really
gente tem
going
uma
to come into
oportunidade
this
muito grande
market. So
que
we have a
é
huge
trabalhar
opportunity here
de forma mais
to
adequada esse
work
dado.
in a
Quem
more
conseguir
adequate
pegar esse
way
dado
in
e
this sense.
oferecer para o cliente
So we're going
melhores
to get this
serviços
data
para o
and
cliente,
we're going to
vai ter
offer
uma
better
vantagem competitiva.
services to
Então,
the clients.
serviços no
You're going to have
sistema
a competitive
bancário
edge if you do
vai
this.
significar desde oferecer um crédito mais direcionado, um crédito que tenha uma situação
So
limite mais adequada,
you're
como
going to
também
have more
você
adequate
conseguir
directed credit,
oferecer para o seu
and
cliente
you also
aquele
be able
produto
to
que ele
offer to
realmente
your
precisa,
client the
aquele
product
produto
that
que
they
vai fazer
really
a
need,
diferença
the
dele
product
para
that
ele
is
e
really going to make a difference
principalmente
in their
ele
lives.
conseguir
And especially
conjugar e
they're
trazer
going to
todos
be
esses
able to
atores
bring together all of these
numa
different
única
actors,
plataforma, numa
stakeholders
única
in a
visão.
single
Então,
platform,
o banco que
in a
conseguir
single vision.
fazer esse
So the
link,
bank that is
ele
able
começa a
to make
ser o
this link,
centro do ecossistema.
they're going to
Acho que
be
esse
the
é um ponto de
center of an
discussão.
ecosystem. So
Quem
I think that's a
será
point that's
esse
really in the
novo
discussion. Who is
centro
going to be
do
this new
ecossistema
hub
relacionado ao
of the
sistema bancário e às
financial
transações
banking
financeiras?
ecosystem,
Os bancos têm
financial
oportunidade
transaction
disso,
ecosystem?
mas
So
obviamente
banks have
também
the
existe o
opportunity
fator
of
das
being these
liquidez.
hubs, but of
Então,
course,
se a gente for pensar
uh,
de oportunidade,
big
quem
companies will
conseguir
also be
oferecer
looking
os
into
melhores
this.
bens e
So if,
serviços, as
as far as
melhores
opportunity,
soluções,
if you're able to
principalmente
give
quem
the best
conseguir
solutions, the
trabalhar
best
melhor
services,
esses
and
dados,
especially those people who
será
are
o
best
ganhador e
able to
terá o
work with the
centro
data,
desse
they will
ecossistema.
be the winner.
E
They will be
centro
the
do
hub of
ecossistema,
this
obviamente, a gente
ecosystem.
está falando de
And
maiores
as a hub of
ganhadores
the
e
ecosystem,
melhores
of course, we're talking
oportunidades
about
de
more
ganhos.
profit,
Então,
more
acho que esse é um
opportunities
desafio muito
for
grande.
making money.
Aqui tem uma
So that's
aplicação
a
muito
huge
importante no
challenge. There's an
mundo
application which
espacial,
is very
porque
important
a
for
indústria
the space
espacial ela
industry. Why?
precisa trabalhar
Because the
com
space
dados,
industry
ela
really
tem
needs to
capacidade,
work
ela
with
pode
data.
oferecer de
The
forma
space industry
igual
has this
esse
capacity and
conhecimento
they
das
can
áreas do
offer
espaço
this
também
knowledge
para a
that they
indústria
use in
financeira.
space
Nós vamos
in
ver lá na
order
frente
to
quando vai
the
ser a
financial
questão de
industry.
cyber e TI, que
We're
também
going to
um
talk
grande
about
problema.
IT
Quem
and
trabalha
cyber.
no mundo
That's
de
another
defesa
very
precisa
important
cuidar da
part.
informação,
Those
mas
people
os
who work
bancos
in
também
defense first,
precisam
they
prevenir
you need to
manter
work
essa oportunidades.
with
Indo para o próximo
protecting
slide,
information.
nós vamos
And so if you have
observar
that
também
expertise, you can sell that to
modelos.
financial
Eu visto
sector as well.
falar nos últimos
So
dias,
in the last few
principalmente
days,
na
we've
imprensa,
especially
muito
in the
fortemente essa
press,
questão do
we've
PIX. O que é o PIX?
heard a
Você
lot
sabe, o
about
PIX é uma
PIX.
nova
What is
forma
PIX?
de
PIX
transação
is a new
bancária
way
ou de
to
transação
have
financeira
financial
que não precisa
transactions or financial
necessariamente
transactions as a
ter
whole,
o banco
in which
sendo o
you
principal
don't
ator dessas
necessarily
transações.
need
Então, aqui,
the
usando
bank to be the main
um
actor
slide
behind these
ou uma
transactions.
figura
So
ilustrativa,
we have a little
observem que a gente
illustration
tem
of
aqui
how
o
this
consumidor
works.
nas duas
So
pontas.
you can see
Ele
that
como
we have the
pagador e ele
consumers
como recebedor.
on both ends,
Aqui,
the one that is
basicamente,
the
o banco
payer and the
ele
one who's
entra
the receiver. So the
simplesmente para fazer
bank
um ponto de cash and
basically
balance.
comes in
Nada mais do que
to do
isso.
cash and
Então,
balance.
observe,
That's
a gente
all they do,
passa a ter
cashing
aqui
and balance.
iniciador,
So you
passa a
can
ter aqui
see
uma
that we have the
tecnologia,
person who starts
entra
this,
um
you have the
participante
technology,
indireto,
and then we
passa
have
pelo
the
sistema
direct
do PIX,
participant. It
confirma
goes
com
through the
o
PIC
banco
system,
e
it
acredita
confirms
na
this with the
conta
other bank, and
da
it'll
empresa que
send
você
a
está fazendo a transação. Então, Observe que o sistema
they will
bancário não
send
está
this to
mais
the company
agora
you're doing the
no centro
transaction
desse
with. So
ecossistema.
now
Ele
the
faz a
bank isn't in the center of
intermediação,
this
mas não é
ecosystem. They
ele
just
que
do
provoca a
a
transação.
sort of
A transação é feita por
conversation, a
métodos
sort
de
of
pagamento,
dialogue, but
é
they're not the
feito de
ones who are
forma
at the center of
indireta
the
e o
transaction. This
banco
is done
faz
through
essa
smartphones
transação.
indirectly.
Só que quando a
The
gente
banks just
olha esse
confirm.
mecanismo, que
So when we
obviamente
look at
também
this
vem sendo
mechanism,
implementado em outros países, como
which is being implemented here and in other countries as
com
well, obviously
sistemas de
with different
autenticação
characteristics
diferentes, a gente vai
and different
ver que isso aqui ainda está com
authentication
muito
methods.
desafio. A gente
So you can
verifica, por
see that
exemplo,
there's a
no
lot of
Brasil,
challenges here. You
o
can see
sistema
that in
bancário
Brazil,
brasileiro
for
ou o Banco
instance,
Central colocou que cada banco
the
pode ter no máximo,
Brazilian
o
central bank said
consumidor
that
pode ter no máximo cinco
each consumer
chaves.
can have
Quem
at
tem mais
most
chave entra com uma
5
vantagem
different
competitiva.
keys.
A gente tem visto,
If you have more
inclusive,
keys,
a revelia
then you
da
have a competitive
LGPD, Lei Geral de
advantage.
Proteção de Dados, bancos ou
So
outras instituições
we've
cadastrando um
actually
monte
seen
de
that
chave para o cliente.
there are
Bom,
there are
como
some
que
banks
isso
that
vai ser
are going against the
usado
law
somente?
and are actually
Como
giving
é
a
que vai
lot of
ser o
keys
volume
to
de
a single
fraude? Como é que vai
single
ser a
customer. So
interação
we
com
need
o
to understand what the
cyber
volume of
aqui?
fraud was going to be like. What's the
Oportunidade.
interaction with
É muita oportunidade
cybersecurity going
porque
to be like? So
virão
there's a world of
problemas. Isso a
opportunities
gente
here
pode ter
because
certeza.
there will be
Problemas
problems here.
ocorrerão.
You can be sure
Ocorrerão
that problems
problemas
will
lá na
occur.
hora de
You'll have
fazer a
problems
confirmação
when you're
da
doing
validação.
the
Vai
confirmation
haver
of the
problema de
operation.
fraude,
There will be
vai haver
problems
problemas de
with
todas as
fraud.
naturezas.
There will
Então,
be
é
problems
sim
of all
uma
different kinds, all
transformação que a gente
varieties and
passa a
shapes.
ter.
So
Sistema de
this
transação
transformation that
real
we're
time,
having in the
em que a gente
transaction,
passa a
real
ter
time
operação 24
transaction
por 7
system,
hoje,
and then we're
no
going to have
específico sede
24/7 operation
ou
now.
remoto, então não é 24 por 7,
It's not the
mas ao
same as the
mesmo
old
tempo,
system, which it
o que
wasn't. It
vai
was
ter de
only five
problema
days a
aqui
week in, in
é
limited
somente
hours. At the same
aguardar para a
time,
gente identificar quais
we'll be
serão, mas
sure, you can be
seguramente
sure that
virão.
there will be lots of
E
problems. Just
isso
wait,
eu
they
posso
will come.
dizer, o
And
sistema
I can
bancário ainda não
say
está
that the banking
completamente
system is still not
atento
yet
ou tendo uma
completely
dimensão completa de
aware
todos os riscos
of
que ainda
the
existirão
dimension of
e
all the
vai
different
haver uma
risks that
necessidade
are
grande,
there.
inclusive, de
And there
inteligência
will be
artificial
a
para saber qual é a
strong
operação.
need for
É
artificial
fraudulenta
intelligence to
ou
know
não?
if
Se eu
that
irei confirmar
operation is
aquela
fraudulent or
operação
not.
ou não. Então, a aplicação
And
aqui é uma
if it
aplicação
needs
bilionária, a gente está falando
this or not. So we're talking
muitos
about a
recursos que
billionaire
serão
application,
transacionados
a
dessa
lot of
forma, e
resources
aí
which
os
will be
bancos vão
processed in this
precisar
way,
automatizar esse
and banks will
processo,
really need to
vão precisar
automatize this
automatizar esses
process.
dados
They
para
will need to automatize this
reconhecimento desses
data,
dados, e eu posso dizer seguramente
and I
que é
can
um
safely
mercado
say
muito valioso para
that
quem conhece
this will be
dados,
a
é um
very
mercado
valuable
muito
market
valioso
for
para quem
those who know
conhece um pouco de
data.
inteligência
It's a
artificial,
very
e nós
valuable
vamos
market for
nunca
those who know
demandar tanto
AI, and
esse
banks
tipo
have
de
never
profissional, esse tipo
demanded
de
this
solução como
kind of
nós demandamos
professional
neste momento.
as
E
much
ainda
as we
mais,
do
vai
today.
haver uma
And I'll go further.
terceirização
There will be
profunda do
a
sistema bancário, porque
deep
muitas dessas operações que antes eram feitas
hiring
in-house
of third
vão
parties
agora
in
ser
the
feitas
banking
por outras
system
empresas parceiras. Então,
because
essas empresas
we're doing
parceiras vão
more and
precisar
more
autenticar
business with
dados,
partner
verificar a
companies. They will be
possibilidade de
authenticating
participem,
data,
vão
verifying
trabalhar com um sistema de controle
cybersecurity.
muito
They'll be
diferente do que nós temos
working
hoje.
with very
Então,
different control systems
oportunidades
than the one we work
enormes. E
with
aí,
today.
eu entendo que a
So
indústria espacial
I understand
depende
that
de
the space
contratos, depende
industry,
de
it
uma
depends
demanda
on
que
contracts,
normalmente
it
não
depends
vem
on demands,
para
which
fazer frente
oftentimes it
às suas
doesn't come
necessidades, ela
regularly in
pode
order to
usar
meet their
esse
needs.
canal
So they
como
can
uma
use this
dualidade para
channel
continuar mantendo o
so
profissional
that they
e
can
vir
keep
para o
on
mundo
using this
da
professional
área
for
espacial ou
the
conhecimento
space area,
espacial, ou seja,
but then
quer
you
na área
can take
militar ou na
all
área
of this
espacial,
knowledge
que o
in the
conhecimento mais
military.
nobre ele
You can take
vem,
all of
que
this knowledge from the
é
military and
gestado,
space act
mas ele tem uma aplicação
sectors.
civil muito forte.
It will be
Isso pode
applied in the
significar, por
civilian
exemplo,
sector. So
pagar
this
as contas
means
no final do
that
mês. Eu
you
acho que
can actually pay the
é um
bills at
papel
the end
muito
of the day.
importante para a indústria de todos os
And I
papéis da
think that's
indústria
very
espacial.
important
Indo
for
para
the
o próximo
space
slide, o que a gente
industry as
vai
a whole.
verificar
And
de
in the next slide, what
situações ou de
is
possíveis
what
riscos
are
que a gente vai
possible
identificar a
risks
partir de Open
we're
Banking e a
going
partir
to
do Pix. Há
in banking and on the PIX
norma
system?
e os bancos vão precisar entregar
So
aquilo que
banks
está
will need to
acordado, aquilo que a
really
legislação coloca.
deliver
Então, tem um
what
risco
the
de compliance
legislation sets
importante.
forth.
O risco de
So
TI,
there's a risk of
derivado do risco de TI,
compliance.
risco de
There's an
segurança.
IT risk as
Também
well.
é uma dimensão importante.
So that's a very important dimension. We have the case of Embratel,
Uma
for
empresa
instance.
que o Banco do Brasil
As
e a
Teresa
Embratel
said,
têm, obviamente, uma
Banco do
relação
Brasil and
muito boa.
Embratel have a
Mas aqui a gente
very
tem
good
risco como
relationship,
fornecedor,
but
que é
we
ter sido
also have a
atacado pelo
risk
clone
as a financer
do
because
da telecomunicação, que
we can be
pode
attacked in
usar o
their
nosso sistema
telecommunication
bancário
side,
e ter uma
and this
interação
could
muito
just
forte do risco
destroy
clínico
our
com o
banking
fornecedor.
system.
Risco operacional, obviamente,
And
vai estar aí
we have an
também,
operational
porque a gente vai
risk,
ver um
which is
crescimento muito
self-evident.
forte de
We're
fraude,
going to have a
a gente vai
strong
ver
growth of
muita atuação de
fraud.
hackers
We're
nesse
going to
mercado.
see a
Isso
lot
tem
of
a ver
action
com o
from
que o professor
hackers.
mesmo mencionou. Será que
And
esses
the professor
modelos de
mentioned
inteligência
this.
artificial vão dar a
Do these
resposta
new AI
adequada? A
models,
gente vê que
will they be
modelos
able
de
to
inteligência
give
artificial
an adequate
podem
response?
sim,
We
ao
see
longo do
that
tempo,
today
divergir no
AI
comportamento.
can actually divert in their behavior. They can adopt behaviors which aren't the ones that we expect. So there are model risks for adopting this kind of technology. There's strategy risks as well. So you're going to lose market if you don't understand the deep transformation, which is the deepest that's ever happened in the banking sector. I'm sure that in 15 years, the banking system will be very different from the banking sector 15 years ago. They're going to mostly be data mining, data processing. The cybernetic risk is very self-evident. The contagion risk is very important. Why? Because we're going to see a lot of different fintechs, a lot of different partnerships, and we might have a risk that one of these small companies might burn, so to speak, the larger company. They might have a company that we've hired, and then they have a problem, and this becomes a larger problem for the bigger company. And we have the image risk as well. Those of you who any company that does this in a bad way will have a great impact from the consumers, and this is very big, expensive problem. So these opportunities do exist, and I would say that it is really important for an industry that really needs contracts that have a very incipient demand, but they have a lot of very special and different knowledge. They can play around with this new ecosystem as an opportunity to really make their technology financially viable. So you can make money off of data processing, the use of satellite images for credit, so that you can have new models where you can see where you have the most financial viability for credit. So we know that the financial system is a system that has a lot of money. So we're talking about resources which are oftentimes missing in the space sector. It's very resource heavy. But here in Brazil, I would say that this duality, this way that you can work with the space sector and other sectors like the banking sector, I think that will be my main message, because there are a lot of synergy opportunities. Once again, I'd like to thank you all for this opportunity. And now we can advance into new challenges and talk about startups. We're going to talk about GAFA. But this was really the message that I'd like to bring. I'd like to thank you all for the invitation, and especially for being able to share with these great colleagues, as well as all the other speakers in the event. Thank you very much.
So, Flavio, thank you very much. In order for us to conclude our panel, I would like to ask you two questions because they arose here, and they are going to interconnect the three presentations. So I'm going to ask the questions at once because we have a limited amount of time, and I believe that we're going to have an interesting debate among you three. The first question is, how can we have incentives for private investment when these investments sometimes they come from public infrastructures? And so some companies they want to enter the space industry, but we have limitations. Sometimes there are fiscal issues, fiscal problems, but I believe that the problem is the public infrastructure. I think this is what she meant. And the second one, data, bank data, space data, communication data. So is there a regulatory and ethical governance regarding this? Or should the countries get together and create this governance? Should the countries work individually or jointly? So what is the role of the government? Encouraging the private applications and also a governance, a regulatory environment, how to use data, and also, do we have incentives for that? And so now I open the floor to all of you so that we can have a debate. And so you are chatting well, and so let's continue.
Acho que a Maria Tereza, com a visão dela
I believe Maria Tereza, with her private and public view. Yes.
Nós fazemos investimentos,
So
inclusive, em
we
lançamento de satélite,
invest,
todos através dos
even we
nossos próprios
invest in the
recursos. Não
launching of
temos incentivo do
satellites
governo.
using our own
E estamos
resources,
praticamente a cada
okay?
2 anos lançando um
And
satélite
every 2
novo,
years, we
investindo na
launch a new
infraestrutura terrestre.
satellite.
Então,
And
assim,
we are also
nós
investing in
nesse
our
momento não
Earth
estamos
facilities.
recebendo
So
aportes
at
do
the
governo para essa
moment, we are
finalidade.
receiving funds
Com
from the government.
relação à proteção de dados,
Regarding
quer dizer, já existe
the
uma lei.
protection of data,
Na
we already
verdade, nós
have a
já
piece of
estávamos nos
legislation for that.
adaptando às leis
We
Europar e
were already
Europol. Então,
adjusting
assim, o fato é
ourselves
tem
to
que
the
cumprir a
European
legislação, então
laws.
tem que
The
utilizar os
fact is,
dados
we have to
respeitando a
obey the
legislação. Nossa
legislation. We
empresa
have to protect the
está
data and
aderente
obey the
mesmo a isso,
legislation.
mas
And
continua
our company is doing
avançando na
that.
questão do
But we
analítico, porque, como
continue
disse o Flávio,
advancing,
esse vai
advancing
ser o
in
novo
terms of
petróleo e a gente diz que
analytics.
vai ser a
And
água,
so,
que é essencial, senão a
so
gente não vive sem isso.
So water is essential, otherwise we wouldn't live without it. And protecting data is going to be similar to that. We are going to have to protect data. Let me make a comment about the question about the government, receiving funds from the government or support from the government. When we talk about support from the government, we go to two extreme points. We have the private sector and public PP, and we have the public sector. So if we think about the USA, because they have the ideal economy in terms of stimulus to technology,
governo americano, do Ministério da Defesa,
and so the Ministry of Defense, the American Ministry of Defense, they invest in this. They have the internet, we have Google Maps, we have Siri, we have Netflix. Everything comes out of the USA. And so for the normal technologies or regular technologies, the private sector must have its response, give its response. But when we talk about disruptive technologies in which the risk is very high, the idea of governmental support, participation of the academia, and participation of the companies, this combo is essential. And so you need to have a model, because when we talk about governmental support, what is the model? So the way that we receive the support is completely different. And so I like DARPA a lot because talking directly to invest in technology or disruptive technology that are going to impact the world in the future. So we must receive support from the government. But if we're talking about technologies that are already mature and they don't need governmental support, or they don't present high risk, then we can continue normally. Professor Kimura, you were part of the technological complex. Complementing and mentioning what Flavio said, these three pillars are very important. So the technological complex here at the University of Brasilia fosters you to have a connection and a partnership between the government, the academia, society, and the private sector. So it's going to be 4 pillars now, 3 in the past and 4 now. So there is a general guidance so that all the players in the market can take part in this innovation process, as Mr. Flavio mentioned. And they were talking about data, governance, etc. There is a regulatory framework, and there is another issue, which is ethics. What are we going to do with the data? So we have data in the banking system. Maybe we can use data to give people loans. And in some countries and some studies identified that the use of AI can increase racism or prejudice issues, depending on their social status or background. And so people that are a little poorer, they are not going to have so much access to loans. So we have to be careful with this social status. Other issues that have to do with regulation and ethical issues, they are very important when it comes to the use of data in our innovation sector. Yes, this happens. Mentioning what Dr. Kimura mentioned. And so a certain region, they don't have bank branches. It's not feasible. So there should be a regulation for that. And so when we talk about artificial intelligence, this can happen at a larger scale. Oh, this consumer here is a good payer, this one is not a good payer. So you're going to expand the scope. So we must have a regulation, we must have ethics, so that we, as a society, can define what do we want. Otherwise, inequality is going to increase. And yes, you can isolate a great sector of society. Yeah. Unfortunately, we don't have more time, but these issues are extremely important, and we can discuss this later on. But thank you so much. I would like to thank the three participants, Maria Tereza, Professor Herbert, Flávio Augusto, and our audience. And thank you very much, and see you next time, okay? Thank you very much. Thank you to this wonderful panel. Thank you so much, and I wish you a wonderful day. And so, I'd like to conclude today's program of the 4th Forum of the Brazilian Space Industry. And you can check our program in 15 minutes from now. We're going to continue with our other event. And now we're going to discuss the 4.0 industry. And the panel is going to be very interesting. They're going to discuss technologies that have already been tested for the space industry and for the food industry. See you again in 15 minutes. Goodbye. Thank you.
O Grupo Energy Telecom, através de suas 4 empresas, atua em todo o Brasil, integrando os principais serviços e soluções quando pensamos em tecnologia. Projetos de Public Cloud, comunicação unificada, Big Data, infraestrutura, Data Center, Client License, Cybersecurity e educação. Você pode contar com o Grupo Energy Telecom. Sempre a melhor solução.
Nós protegemos a tecnologia para você explorar novas realidades. Fazer o que quiser, quando quiser. Fazer amigos virtuais. Estar perto, mesmo estando longe. E conquistar novas fronteiras. Garantimos sua segurança digital para um futuro melhor. Kaspersky. Bring on the future.
Vale do Paraíba, uma região única com múltiplas vocações. A nossa é a tecnologia, é a inovação. Nós somos a NIP-BR. Trabalhamos para integrar, conectar, expandir, informar, entreter. A NIP-BR é solução corporativa, é internet, TV por assinatura, é telefonia digital. Os melhores serviços com o melhor custo-benefício. NIP-BR, sua melhor opção em internet, telefonia e TV por assinatura.
Você é daqueles que acham que ser moderno é ter um aplicativo para cuidar do seu dinheiro? É também. Agora, moderno mesmo é fazer parte de um grupo de pessoas que cooperam e crescem juntas.
Tem gente que acha que um bom atendimento é ter um gerente pronto para te ajudar. Nada mal, né?
Mas pra gente ter voz
e participar das decisões relacionadas ao nosso dinheiro.
Tem gente que acha que somos um banco. Somos muito mais. Somos feitos de valores.
Our infrastructure and natural resources can't keep up with growing demands. We need to be smarter. We need to care more. It's time to create smart infrastructure. We can because we connect energy systems, buildings, and industries to adapt and evolve the way we live and work for the good of the planet and the people. Creating environments that care. Smart infrastructure from Siemens.
A maior rede de pesquisas do mundo, com 5,5 bilhões de acessos por dia. Uma rede social avaliada em 70,7 milhões. Sabe qual a semelhança entre essas empresas? O investimento em softwares e algoritmos inteligentes. Tinova e SPS.
Na era da transformação digital, a Tria Software é o seu parceiro ideal. Trabalhamos com a aplicação de solução em software padronizada ou sob medida para melhorar o desempenho dos processos de sua empresa. Tria Software.